Hello, everyone. Welcome to Talking Logistics, where we have conversations with thought leaders and newsmakers in the supply chain logistics industry. It's my great pleasure to welcome to today's program Anthony Vitiello, who's head of sales at UltraShipTMS, a PCS company after the recent acquisition. And today we're going to talk about smart market automation in TMS. Now, we all know that the transportation market is cyclical, but it's really been a roller coaster ride, the past couple of years. And with the COVID-19 pandemic this year being kind of the latest shock, to the system. But despite all the ups and downs, the lesson still remains the same. Shippers have to keep finding new ways to drive continuous improvement in their transportation operations. And this is particularly true in how they leverage the spot market. So what are some of the challenges involved, and how have transportation management systems evolved to help shippers find capacity quickly, efficiently, and at a fair price? Well, those are going to be the main questions we're going to address in today's episode. And it's great to welcome Anthony back on the program to share his insights and perspective on this topic. So, Anthony, welcome to the program.
Thanks for having me, Adrian. Always a high point of the marketing year when I get to join you on these webisodes. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Certainly, this has been like I said, a roller coaster of a year from a transportation standpoint. Obviously, there for you guys at UltraShipTMS, there have been some highlights, including the recent, acquisition by PCS. So I'm sure that's opening up some great opportunities as well. But as a way to kind of kick off the conversation, I'm kind of curious. What are you hearing from your clients in terms of how they view the current state of the transportation market? I mean, what's top of mind, particularly for shippers today?
It's a great question. I think surprising precisely nobody. I think what's really on the top of mind for shippers, in all industries, is the state of flux that we find ourselves in multiple areas all at once. I mean, you touched on it at the beginning. COVID really has done a great job of exposing weaknesses or shortcomings in shippers' capabilities, particularly when it comes to spot market activity, but in all their areas, in their utilization of technology and so forth. And what we've seen really is that it's prompted a lot of shippers to accelerate their timeline for sourcing and implementing technology, because whereas it might have been a nice to have, 9 to 12 months ago, the fractures that have been exposed really have driven a lot of them to just decide, just pull the Band-Aid off all at once. We got to get this going, not just for addressing COVID-related challenges, but going forward. I mean, this was something on everybody's radar. Technology was, already a ball that was rolling downhill, but it's really picked up a lot of speed. Other things that I'm hearing, is a distinct need for increased flexibility in their operations, given the instability that's being driven by changes in shopping habits and the motion of products through the supply chain. That instability is really highlighted the need to be able to accommodate for unplanned movements and actions. And carrying that one step forward, then it becomes, okay, well, with these unplanned sort of activities that we're doing, how are we managing rates? How are we keeping costs in control? We're seeing dramatic fluctuations in individual lanes across different modes as they have to move things in unconventional, through unconventional channels, and of course in volumes. So finding capacity in tight segments and being able to quickly recalibrate rates in areas where capacity has expanded, it's important to help them to be able to do that quickly and effectively to maintain competitive rates. And a couple other little items, to round out the list of gripes that you're hearing from shipper customers, are the perennial things like data systems integration challenges and, overcoming, how to field the best tech stack. And another thing is that we're hearing a lot lately is the whole notion of contactless supply chain, paperless bills of lading, all these contactless kind of strategies. So that's sort of the playing field that we're operating in at the moment.
Yeah, I like the way you talked about kind of ripped off the Band-Aid there, right? I mean, I think that, COVID has certainly accelerated, a lot of these initiatives that a lot of shippers had kind of on the sidelines, or they were kind of, the classic analysis paralysis, and not taking any action. And really, the pandemic in many ways kind of forced the issues because, not only did they have to deal with, whether it was, huge spikes in demand, or have to deal with having to really almost move in a completely different direction to stay alive as a business. They realized that operating with spreadsheets and manual processes and everything else, that the fact that they hadn't been on this digital transformation journey in the past, now really they had to try to accelerate their efforts in that area. And flexibility is another thing I hear a lot of as well. I think it's, we've always talked about it, the fact that, there's a lot of uncertainty in the market. There's always, it's a very dynamic market, but I think more so than ever, companies are realizing that unless they are able to quickly navigate whatever changes or whatever new requirements the market brings to them, it's going to be, very difficult for them to succeed moving forward. So, not only from a process standpoint, but from a technology standpoint, in terms of being able to have that technology in place to be able to enable that flexibility, that agility, that responsiveness, to what's happening in the market. And certainly, I think there's no market that reflects kind of that uncertainty, that ups and downs as a transportation market, where sometimes, you always talk about, well, it's a shipper's market, it's a carrier's market, and the back and forth between that. And the reality is that, it doesn't really matter whether it's a shipper's market or a carrier's market. You have to find ways to, drive automation in the process, and find ways to create more, win-win partnerships with, between shippers and carriers out there in the industry. So when you think about TMS, I know that when a lot of folks think of transportation management systems, they generally think about, managing, their transportation operations with their contracted carriers. And that still tends to be the majority of the freight moves via contracted carriers. But shippers often have to use, the spot market, too, in some cases more than they want to. What are some of the challenges associated with using the spot market to find capacity?
Yeah, there's definitely some challenges. I think part of it is, as you noted, particularly for shippers and the high volume ones that already have TMS solutions in place. Not every TMS comes stock with spot market automation tools built in. That was one of the sort of bits of foresight that our development team had, and built this tool out several years ago now, to provide this ability to access the spot market in an automated fashion. But some of the challenges associated with that, even with in the absence of automation for this, is the timeliness factor. Obviously, spot market is frequently, most often used for expedited freight, for loads that you don't have covered, but the clock is ticking down on the must arrive by date. You got to get these wheels under these things, get them out on the road. So timeliness, is certainly one of the challenges in accessing capacity through the spot market. Another thing, is achieving clarity on the real-time rates in any given lane. It's one thing to just ask a carrier, hey, can you move this freight for me on an expedited basis, and they give you a rate, but that's not sustainable writ large. You can't just be paying a premium on everything you move on the spot market. You need spot market tools that help you understand the current rate structure, given today's environment. And, as we noted, before, is it a shipper's market? Is it a carrier's market? That, pendulum is swinging wildly these days, industry by industry. So being able to have clarity into real-time rates is definitely a challenge. And then, the last thing is just, the sort of nuts and bolts, the level of activity, the level of effort required on the part of a transportation operation to run spot bid request events, to actually, do this process, go out looking for bids and then managing that process. In the absence of technology, that's a very manual process, and it's time consuming and takes away from all the rest of the non-expedite day-to-day work that these people have to be doing. So those would be the three big sort of challenges: the timeliness, the clarity on rates, and the amount of time it takes to execute spot market activity.
Yeah, I know, I always used to hear folks talk about, dialing for diesels, right? So the moment that
Right.
that their routing guide got exhausted, it was, people picking up the phone and calling as many carriers as they could find, to see who can pick up the load. And, obviously that's a very, like you said, it's a very time consuming process. It's a very manual, process. And, ultimately, like you said, not having that broader market intelligence in terms of what exactly are the spot rates looking like in particular lanes, particular regions of the country, and so forth. Not having that visibility, that understanding, is also a hindrance there in terms of doing it not only efficiently and in a more automated way, but also doing it in a way that you've got some knowledge whether you're in line with what the market is from a spot standpoint, or whether you're overpaying or in some cases underpaying, which would be a good thing. But again, having that visibility, like you said, is important. So let's talk a little bit about how transportation management systems have evolved to help shippers find this capacity more quickly and efficiently, and at having that transparency to know you're getting a fair price at it.
Yeah, and then this is the I can't speak to necessarily what other systems are doing, but I can tell you, what we've got, going on under the hood in our solution. I think, helping find capacity quickly and efficiently and at a fair price, requires a level of automation that allows you to run, what I like to refer to as micro procurement events, maybe just on a lane by lane basis or a handful of lanes. The way it works, is providing automation solutions that help minimize that level of effort I talked about before, to sort of automate the process so that a transportation group can quickly stand up a small bidding event on lanes that they need, to move freight in on an expedited fashion. The way ours works is it leverages existing onboarded contract carriers that are within the TMS. Although with the new tools and aspects that will be coming to the PCS solution, which is going to incorporate both suites of products under one user interface, you would be able to even tap into pools of available carriers outside of what you might have in your list of contract carriers. But the system allows you to build what we call carrier groups in the spot market automation module, so you can sort of pick the carriers from either your embedded base of carriers or from external pools of available carriers that are vetted in the PCS system, and you can set those groups up by geography or by location, or any of those kind of parameters, and it sets up a sort of reverse auction style bidding system, wherein you set up the carrier group. You can see what carriers you have in that group. You can deselect any ones, like for example, if you have a dry load, you need a dry van, and there are 3 reefer carriers in there. You can deselect those, and I'll explain why this is important. But so once you've got the group selected and the individual carriers that you want to send the bid request to in the group, you can then send out electronically a bid request, and it works like a reverse auction type of system where all the carriers receive the electronic bid request at the same time, and they're able to respond with their bid, for the freight in that lane. And all the carriers watching can view in real time and see whether their current bid is the lowest bid. When it's the lowest bid, it says, congratulations, you're the lowest bid, but the clock is still running, giving time for other carriers to try and beat that rate. And in the background, the transportation user gets to see everybody's bid. Obviously each individual carrier only sees their bid and whether or not they're the lowest bid at the moment. At the point at which the transportation manager, or the dispatcher decides there's a rate that he likes, he can select that rate at any point, and it automatically closes out the event, or he can let it run for the prescribed amount of time, whether that's 60-minute, 90-minute, whatever interval the customer wants, and then select the winning bid at the bottom. At that point, the shipper can, accepts the rate and closes the event, and then tenders that load to the selected carrier. And in that way, they're able to run this event quickly, efficiently, and get to, what is going to be at or near the real-time rate for that lane on that day, which is important because, as we know, with such dramatic fluctuations, given, the changes that are happening in different areas and in different industries, the rates that you might have contracted rates on file, they might be 4, 5, 6 months old from the last time you ran a procurement event. And, having this ability to, on a lane by lane basis, go out and look for a rate in that lane, it gives them, a view into what the current market rate is in that lane, which is a very effective way to operate.
Yeah, no, a lot, very interesting there. I think you hit on something that I think I'm seeing as well. I mean, we're really seeing kind of this spectrum of how shippers and carriers are working with each other, right? So there's always the annual procurement bid, but I think there's a growing sense that there's still a role for that, but that's not the end all, right? So because you might do your procurement bid in January, but come March, April, May, June, the carrier's network might be completely different. Your network might be completely different based on what's happening with the economy and so forth. So a lot of the assumptions and factors that went into that original procurement bid may no longer be valid. So that's where you end up going and have to go into the spot market, or doing these mini bids, if you will, throughout the course of the year. I like the concept of creating carrier groups, because I think one of the things that, from a shipper standpoint, that I know is important is, they want to make sure at the end of the day that whatever, that there's a validation that takes place, if you will, that the carriers they're working with are carriers that meet their criteria in terms of safety, in terms of insurance, and the like. And so what I've seen with these tools is what shippers tend to do is they create carrier groups. The initial phase is with carriers that they already have a relationship, perhaps on other lanes, that they're familiar with each other already. So there's already a high level of trust and confidence that any of these carriers that could take that load that responds to this bid within this carrier group is going to be a high quality carrier to do that.
The other side of that coin is also by setting up the groups, you're protecting the integrity of your bidding process, because if you're consistently sending bid requests out to carriers that in a broadcast fashion, you maybe the carriers that don't even pull freight in that lane or don't have the right equipment, it dilutes your the offer. A carrier is going to only respond 2 or 3 times and realize these guys are sending me requests for bids in lanes that I don't operate. Next time that email comes across or that request comes across, I'm not even going to bother to read it because it's never been relevant to me. So it really helps, ensure that when carriers receive the bid request from you, that they know it's freight that they're going to want to potentially pull. So that's
That's a great point. I think this is where the annual bidding process provides some great intelligence, right? Because maybe a carrier might have bid on that lane during the annual procurement process. Maybe they didn't get maybe they didn't get the lane, they didn't get the contract in that lane. But now that carrier has that equipment, that carrier operates in that lane because you have that data from their annual procurement event. So that when you create a carrier group to service a particular lane or particular region, to include that carrier because they expressed interest in that lane as part of the annual contracting process.
Yeah. And once those groups are configured, at the beginning, I mean, you can periodically review them to make sure they're still accurate, but then it's a replicable automated process. You know that for this region, this is the group you want to send the bid request out to. And I mean, it's quick. You can get the whole thing done, 30, 45 minutes, start to finish.
Right. So yeah, I mean, I think it's a great example again of how to leverage, technology, moving away from these manual processes, the dialing for diesels or hitting load boards and, this very, ad hoc, kind of approach, and really leveraging the power of the TMS and the data that you have in the TMS to take a much more intelligent and automated, approach to this. So ultimately, I mean, from your customers that are using this, I mean, what are some of the benefits of using this technology to better utilize the spot market?
Well, in a tight capacity environment, the obvious sort of benefit is quick and surgical access to capacity when you need it. And I mean, spot market activity has been traditionally, for expedite. Not more and more these days it's the micro procurement piece, and you get both benefits. But the first and primary benefit is that quick access to capacity. Not having to spend time dialing, right? Not having to spend time, with manual processes to get that done. Other benefits include. Well, we spoke about, how the automated process supports only the inclusion of relevant carriers, and as I noted, that avoids the dilution of the responses that you're going to get by making sure that the bids you request are all highly relevant to the carriers that are receiving them. This is a big one, and again, sort of ties into the micro procurement or sort of aspect of this is once the event is completed, right, and the transportation person has selected the carrier with the rate that they like to move that move that freight. The automation tool allows a process for requesting that the carrier give permission to publish that rate in the TMS in the routing guide for that lane. They don't have to accept, but in our experience, the majority of the time they do, and then that accepted bid becomes a published rate and helps update. Every time you use this, you're helping to sort of update the rates that you have in any given lane with the more recent real time sort of rates. So that's a big benefit. It saves extraordinary cost over time. We talked about access to capacity. And I guess really those are the two big ones. The quick access to capacity, and then the ability to validate rates in lanes where volume may have changed significantly since the last time you ran a procurement event, and particularly in today's environment where some industries are doing 10 times the business they did this time last year, while other industries they're doing 1/10 the business. So that causes a lot of churn and a lot of fluctuation. And this tool allows the users to validate the rates in the lanes that they pull in, and do that in much closer to real time. So those are the two primary benefits.
Yeah, it's interesting, in terms of being able to, publish that rate or ask for permission to publish, that rate. Because I mean, on the surface, you might think, oh gosh, my contracted rate is, I'm just pulling numbers here. My contracted rate, it's $1.80, right? But this carrier is saying it's $1.95 or $2. So I'm now it's going to be higher. But the reality is that that's the new market rate, right? So what's happening is whenever you're sending it out at the 180, no one's taking it. So you're getting into the situation of having to hit this, going through this whole process of hitting the spot market. Whereas now, if you've actually now aligned yourselves with what's the actual market rates out there, now you're able to, from the get-go, automate tendering and execution without even having to go through to the spot market anymore, because now you've adjusted your rates accordingly in a more continuous and real-time fashion. So a lot of folks might just look at that rate and say, okay, I'm paying a higher rate, but not recognizing that, hey, your tender acceptance rate went from 97% to 89% because your contract rates are completely below market. And it's forcing you to go through this whole spot market, tap the spot market more. Whereas now, if you are able to in more real time align your market, your contractor rates to market rates, your tender acceptance rate is going to go up, and you're going to be able to
On-time
operate in more
performance.
lights out fashion, like you were in the past. So
That's an exceptional point. Rate validation is rate validation. Whether the rate's gone up or the rate's gone down, you still need to validate it. And yes, it's certainly that follows through to on-time performance and so forth. Because if you're detained by the fact that an old rate is too low in the system, and even with the automatic tendering, it goes all the way through the cascade, comes to the bottom, still winds up at the spot. You want to know that sooner than later. Get the updated rate into the system, and then to your point, your carrier acceptance number goes up, and your on-time performance goes up. So,
right, absolutely. Well, Anthony, just as a way to wrap up, then, I mean, based on everything we talked about, based on the lessons learned, from this year, I mean, what will define success in transportation management in 2021 and beyond from your perspective?
Well, to sort of tie this back to the comments we made at the top of things here, companies are now moving quickly with much more purposeful, purpose-driven sort of mentality that this needs to be done. And I think part of the things that were impediments in the past, are the technical aspects, data integration, selecting the right tools to build your tech stack, figuring out, which tools, who's got the better API, to put these things all together. Now that they're, sort of facing the music and pulling that Band-Aid off, to continue that analogy, I think the lessons learned are the time is now to really dig in and understand, the benefits that come from effective data integration between systems, pulling that Band-Aid off to determine, look, we need to have a best-in-class tool, right? And to build the right tech stack. And I think, you're going to start to see, and I know this is definitely true of the opportunity here now with, as a PCS company, ready API integrations, an ecosystem of tools and data sets that are integrated from day one, because all of that integration and all of that harnessing of the data supports things like machine learning and the predictive analytics, and using the data from across multiple systems to achieve, better supply chain throughput, to achieve, aspirational goals like paperless and contactless, which are moved from the realm of aspirational now into the realm of the, currently underway and getting ready for deployment. And, by seeking out technology providers that have done that heavy lift, of systems integrations at the outset, you're gonna be well situated as a shipper and a carrier and a broker to leverage technology that provides the data ecosystem right out of the box. And I think that's what's going to define success in transportation management is harnessing and embracing the cutting edge of data solutions and integration. So that's where I see it all headed.
Yeah, no, I think, I think, what I heard there, and I think we already talked about it, is that, the big lesson learned is you can't stand by the sidelines anymore when it comes to, digital transformation, when it comes to, eliminating, waste from your processes, eliminating manual processes and so forth, because the market is moving too fast, customer requirements are moving too fast, and there's still ongoing uncertainty out there. So in order to be, as we all hear, agile, responsive, flexible, you can't stand in the sidelines anymore and operate as if you were still in 1999 or 1989. You've got to be, in the here and now, and really embracing, some of these capabilities that are available to companies today. So Anthony, always great, having you on the program, and I want to thank you for sharing your insights and perspective on this topic.
My pleasure. Always happy to speak with you, Adrian. Always good conversation.
Great. And if you've got any questions, for Anthony, you can either post them at the UltraShipTMS, website or on Talking Logistics, and I'm sure he'll be more than happy to respond via that medium. Again, thank you for joining us, and look forward to seeing you in a future episode of Talking Logistics. Have a
Very
great day.
good. Bye now.